In the last episode of Radio Skills for Podcasters, we talked about unleashing the power of the presenter. In this episode, we're going to run through the checklist you need to build that power up. Welcome to episode 11 of Radio Skills for Podcasters.
Learn the secrets of the radio industry.
Create powerful podcasts.
Powerful podcasts.
Hello, I'm Kevin Field, your host of Radio Skills for Podcasters. In each episode, I share a plethora of skills, tips and tricks, and mistakes gained from a career of working in the radio industry. We've talked about all sorts of things in this podcast. Now, we're going to do a checklist. Oh yes, a list of skills that you need and techniques you need to unleash the power of the presenter to make it sing. I always like to know if this podcast helps you out. Please do provide some feedback, get in touch, tell me what you think. If you've got any questions, I will get back to you. It's really easy to get in touch. skills@radioskillsforpodcasters.com or on Twitter @radio_skills. There's no top tip in this episode because the checklist is a series of top tips. So let's do it.
This is Radio Skills for Podcasters.
First off, what is the point of your topic? What are you talking about? If you have no point, what are you doing it for? We need a point to the program, a reason that program exists. That episode has a reason for the listener to tune in. It's the same with any program. You need a reason for them to be here. Now, it may be, as a presenter, it's just to wake them up and they enjoy your show in the morning, you make them laugh, and that's all it's about. That may be what your podcast is about, just having a giggle. That's fine, as long as you have a point. You open the microphone and there's no point to you being there. Exactly. What's the point? Also think about, why should the listener care about what you're talking about? Why should they give a monkeys? And it's something we always do when we're putting documentaries together. We think, right, okay, so we've got this really lovely story. It's great, but why do they care? Why is it powerful to them, the listener? Why should one person care about what you're doing? Doesn't matter about hundreds and thousands. Why should one person care about what you're doing? Remember, you're not podcasting to many. You're podcasting to one. So think about that one person. Why should they care? And then it's, why are you talking about it anyway? So if I ask these questions for me right now, why am I talking about this checklist? Well, hopefully it'll help you when you're doing what you do with your podcast. So it helps you to sit back and go, yeah, why do I do that feature? What's the point of having that feature in my podcast? And why am I talking about this subject matter? So this is why I'm talking about this anyway. What are you trying to achieve with your podcast? Build your content around the reason your podcast exists. Don't stray to shiny new things. I hear so many podcasts where they go off topic completely. Their podcast might be about a set area, and you think, this is a great podcast, this is really good, and I'm learning something from it. And then suddenly they get the next shiny person on their podcast because they're shiny and everyone's got them on the podcast as an interview. And you kind of go, why is this person here? What's the reason they're on this podcast? So you have to define it. Build your content around the reason your podcast exists. I'll get guests on this podcast in the future. I'll have interviews. But it'll be reasons for this podcast to exist. I'm just not going to put things on that don't have a reason to be here. So don't stray to the shiny new things. Relate with your target listener. Think like your listener. Build your program, your podcast, your content for your listener. And that's the same with any product. You know, when you're selling something, it's the same. You have to relate to the audience or you're not going to sell what you want to sell, right? You need to find that gap in the market, all of that stuff. Yeah, you know it. And it's the same with podcasting, radio, speech, radio, all of that. You've got to find that gap that people are interested in. There's an interesting thing to share with you, actually, a parable of this. And I wrote a blog post about this recently, and you can catch it online at radioskillsforpodcasters.com. And this is the interesting thing. It happens, I think, in all walks of life. My better half, in her workplace, they have a restaurant they all use. And recently they've got a new chef, and he makes killer curries. But they're too killer. They're too hot. They're too spicy. Many of the staff who go to get lunch when he's on don't eat their lunch because it's too hot. I said, have you ever told him? And my other half said, well, I went up and said, why the curry's so spicy? And the chef replied, because that's the way I like it. Now, I've worked with lots of chefs over the years from doing my event hosting stuff at food festivals, and I host the Taste of Kent Awards and all that sort of stuff. And each time they tell me this: you need to create your dishes for the people who come in your restaurant. So if you're making food for a large audience in a workplace, then you make a curry by all means, but don't make it to your taste. Make it to the taste of the audience, the person who's coming in to buy and eat your food. And if it's too spicy, most of them aren't going to buy it. That's why in most restaurants, these are sort of work restaurants, curries aren't that spicy. And the same thing could be said for you and your podcast. So don't make it just because you like it like that. Think about your listener, how they might like your content. The other thing to do is think about how to get your subject across in a creative way. How to be different to others, not be the same, be creative, have a different approach. You don't just have to do an interview. You don't just have to do a monologue like this. You could be different. Think about how you get your subject across to your listener in a creative way. And this is really important. Lots of people just do interviews down the line or via Skype. What about if you do it slightly differently? The Audio Drama Podcast. It's fantastic. The Audio Drama Production Podcast. It's really good because what they do is they do theirs outside. They do it differently. There's two of them and they're outside doing their podcast. Love that. You get lots of different sounds from outside. They do that on purpose. If your podcast is about ships, boats and harbours, go to the harbour. Have all the sounds of the seagulls and things like that, Just theme it. You can be really creative. Remember that you paint pictures with words. Radio does it, podcast does it. You can create the imagination in someone's mind is fantastic. Really, paint pictures with words. Be creative with the words you use. Your listener has a theatre in their head and they're just waiting for you to get on the stage and create the scenery. Paint pictures with words. Don't ramble or use too many words. Less is more. The old theory of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And the stand out from the crowd thing is really important. Be real, be you, but try and stand out in some way. Do something that other people don't do. Try not to copy the thing that other people do. There's someone I heard the other day who was doing the lightning round. Now, okay, there's one podcast we all know does a lightning round. That lightning round was done on a radio station in the UK many, many years ago. Do something different. Be creative. Smile. It always helps to smile. It changes the way you sound. It really does. And it also makes you move your lips a bit more. So you, pronunciation, so you intonate differently. Do what you do and have fun. Seriously, enjoy what you're doing. All this stuff that I sling at you with the techniques from the radio industry, I use them and I still have fun. You can use them as well.
Learn the secrets of the radio industry.
Radio Skills for Podcasters.
That's your presentation checklist from Radio Skills for Podcasters. Not everything, but most things. Try those, add your own to it as well. You can get your hands on a digital version of the Podcast Presenters Checklist by simply visiting the show notes by going to radioskillsforpodcasters.com, where it's there available for you for free. Next time on Radio Skills for Podcasters, we've recorded the show. It's time to edit it. It's the producer checklist coming up in episode 12 of Radio Skills for Podcasters. See you then.
Find us on Facebook, Google+, Radio Skills for Podcasters.
At radio_skills on Twitter.
Thanks for listening.
www.radioskillsforpodcasters.com.